April 8th, 1940. The Norwegian Sea, 150 miles northwest of Trondheim. The bow of HMS Glowworm punches through another mountain of gray-green water, sending sheets of freezing spray cascading across her bridge. Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roop grips the rail, his knuckles white beneath worn leather gloves. The destroyer beneath his feet, all 1,350 tons of British steel and determination shudders with each impact against the towering waves. You can taste the salt in the air. Feel the bone-deep cold that penetrates even the thickest peacoat. This is the North Atlantic in April, a place where the sea itself seems intent on killing you before the Germans get their chance. Roop doesn't know it yet, but in less than 2 hours, he'll be dead. So will most of his crew. But first, they're going to write themselves into naval legend with an act of defiance so audacious, so impossibly brave, that even their enemies will salute them. The storm had separated Glowworm from the rest of the fleet during the night. She'd been part of Operation Wilfred, the British attempt to mine Norwegian waters and cut off Germany's vital iron ore supply route. Now, alone in these hostile waters, she's searching for a man overboard, a sailor, swept from her deck by the mountainous seas. Below decks, 149 men work their stations. They're ordinary sailors, most barely out of their teens. Boys from Liverpool and London, Glasgow and Cardiff. They joined the Navy for adventure, for 3 square meals a day, for a chance to see the world. They didn't sign up to become legends. That part just happens. In the radio room, operators strain to hear through the static. The storm is playing havoc with communications. They've lost contact with the battlecruiser HMS Renown and the rest of the screening force. For all practical purposes, Glowworm is alone. Leading seaman George Owen peers through the spray-lashed windows of the bridge, searching for any sign of their missing shipmate. The visibility is perhaps 200 yards, maybe less. In these conditions, you could sail within spitting distance of the entire German fleet and never know it, which, as it happens, is almost exactly what they're about to do. At 0830, a shadow emerges from the storm. It's a ship, but not British. The silhouette is all wrong. Too sharp, too angular. German, ship bearing green 4 to 5. The lookout's voice cuts through the howling wind. Roop swings his binoculars toward the contact. Through the spray and mist, he can make out the distinctive lines of a German destroyer. It's one of their newer ones, bigger than Glowworm, more heavily armed. The smart play would be to turn away, use the storm as cover, run for the protection of the British fleet. But Gerard Roop isn't thinking about the smart play. He's thinking about Norway, about the German invasion force that must be out here somewhere, about his duty to gather intelligence, and, if possible, disrupt whatever the enemy is planning. Action stations. The klaxon wails through the ship. Men who moments before were searching for a shipmate now race to their battle positions. In the engine room, Chief Engineer Lieutenant Arthur Tuckwell pushes his engines harder, coaxing every ounce of speed from Glowworm's turbines. The German destroyer she's the Z-11 Bernd von Arnim has spotted them too. She's turning, trying to open the range, but Roop isn't having it. He orders full speed ahead, angling to cut off the enemy's escape route. What follows is a running battle in conditions that would make most captains think twice about leaving port. The 2 destroyers exchange fire through walls of spray and driving rain. 4-inch shells arc through the storm-darkened sky. The range closes, opens, closes again, as both ships fight the sea as much as each other. On Glowworm's bridge, Roop watches the fall of shot, calling corrections to his gunnery officer. They score hits, bright flashes of orange, against the German's gray hull. But the Bernd von Arnim is giving as good as she gets. Shrapnel rattles against Glowworm's superstructure like deadly hail. Then, through a gap in the weather, Roop spots something that makes his blood run cold. Another shadow, massive and menacing. Then another, and another. It's not just one German destroyer they've stumbled upon. It's an entire invasion fleet. The radio operator's fingers fly across his keys, tapping out an urgent signal to the Admiralty. Large German force sighted, position 60, 4 degrees north, 6 degrees east, am engaging. That message, those few brief words hammered out in Morse code, will change the course of history. It's the first warning the British will receive that the German invasion of Norway has begun, but for Glowworm and her crew, it might also be their epitaph. The German destroyer is trying to lead them somewhere, Rupp is sure of it. The Bern von Arnim keeps adjusting course, not quite fleeing, not quite fighting. It's a delaying action, a matador's cape drawing the bull forward. "She's playing for time, sir," observes Glowworm's navigator, Lieutenant Francis O'Neill. The young Irishman has plotted their position. They're far from any British support, deep in what will soon become enemy waters. But Rupp can't let the destroyer escape. She knows Glowworm's position, her course, her condition. If she gets away, she'll vector the entire German fleet onto them. Their only chance is to silence her first. The chase continues through the storm. Glowworm's guns bark defiance at the weather and the enemy alike. Her crew works with practiced efficiency despite the ship's violent motion. In the forward gun turret, sailors load shells that weigh as much as they do, their movements synchronized like a deadly ballet despite the deck pitching beneath their feet. Below, in the boiler rooms, stokers feed the furnaces in heat that would kill an unacclimated man in minutes. The temperature gauges climb toward their red lines. Chief Engineer Tuckwell watches them like a hawk. Push too hard, and they'll blow a boiler. Don't push hard enough, and they'll lose their quarry. At 0855, the game changes. Through the rain and mist, a shape materializes that dwarfs everything else on that gray morning. It's not another destroyer. It's the Admiral Hipper 14,000 tons of German heavy cruiser, bristling with 8-inch guns that can split Glowworm in half with a single salvo. For a moment, just a heartbeat, there's silence on Glowworm's bridge. Every officer, every sailor who can see what they're facing knows what this means. They're a flyweight boxer who's just stepped into the ring with a heavyweight champion. The smart play, the only sane play, is to run, turn hard to port, make smoke, pray the storm hides them long enough to escape. Rupp looks at his officers. These men have served with him through the North Sea patrols, through the bitter winter months of the phony war. He knows what they're thinking. He knows what he should do. "Signal all stations," he says quietly. "We're going in." If you could freeze this moment, capture it like a photograph, you'd see something remarkable in the faces of Glowworm's bridge crew. Not fear, though. That's certainly there. Not resignation. What you'd see is determination, the kind that says, if this is where we make our stand, then by God, we'll make it count. The Admiral Hipper opens fire at 0957. Her first salvo straddles Glowworm, sending towers of water higher than the destroyer's masts. The second salvo is closer. The third tears into Glowworm's hull like it's made of paper. The destroyer staggers, mortally wounded but not yet dead. Her forward gun mount is destroyed, taking half its crew with it. Fires break out amidships. In the radio room, operators continue transmitting even as smoke fills their compartment. Every second they can keep broadcasting is another second of warning for the British fleet. But Rupp isn't thinking about sending messages anymore. He's thinking about something else entirely, something that no destroyer captain in his right mind would consider. He's thinking about ramming. "Port 20!" he shouts above the din of exploding shells. "All ahead, full!" Glowworm begins her turn, building speed despite her wounds. The range to Admiral Hipper closes rapidly, too rapidly for the cruiser's big guns to track. The German captain, Helmuth High, can't believe what he's seeing. This tiny British destroyer, already burning, already dying, is charging straight at him. On Glowworm's bridge, The helmsman holds his course steady, despite every instinct screaming at him to turn away. The distance shrinks. 1,000 yards, 500, 200. You can imagine that final minute. The towering steel cliff of the Admiral Hipper growing larger, larger, until it fills the entire world. The German sailors on her deck, scrambling away from the rail. The British crew bracing for impact, knowing that most of them won't survive what comes next. At 1,013 hours, HMS Glowworm slams into the Admiral Hipper's starboard side at nearly 30 knots. The sound is indescribable, not just metal against metal, but the death cry of a ship. Glowworm's bow crumples like aluminum foil, but her momentum carries her forward, her superstructure grinding along the cruiser's hull in a shower of sparks and shrieking steel. For a moment, the two ships are locked together in a deadly embrace. Glowworm's remaining guns, those still manned, continue firing point-blank into the German cruiser. On Admiral Hipper's deck, damage control parties rush to assess the destruction. The British destroyer has torn a gash 40 meters long in their hull. Water is pouring into the cruiser's compartments. But physics is cruel to the smaller ship. As Glowworm scrapes past, her hull, already weakened by German shells, begins to tear apart. Her back breaks. Steam lines rupture. In the engine room, Tuckwell and his men fight to keep the pumps running, even as the North Atlantic pours in around them. The two ships separate, Glowworm falling away to starboard, listing heavily. She's done her damage. Admiral Hipper will need weeks of repairs, will miss the initial stages of the Norwegian campaign. But the price? Abandoned ship. Rupp's order carries across the dying destroyer. But even now, discipline holds. The crew doesn't panic. They destroy codebooks, wreck equipment that might be useful to the enemy. In the radio room, the operators send one last signal, am abandoning ship. The evacuation is orderly at first. Life rafts are launched. Men help wounded shipmates to the rail. But Glowworm is going fast now, faster than anyone expected. The list increases to 30 degrees, 40, 50. Lieutenant Commander Rupp moves through his ship one last time, ensuring everyone who can get off has gotten off. He helps a wounded sailor to the rail, practically throws him over the side. Someone shouts for him to jump, but he's still checking, still searching. At 1024 HMS Glowworm capsizes. Those who survived would never forget the sound, the roar of escaping air, the crash of everything inside the ship breaking loose, the hiss of cold water meeting hot metal, and then, with a final shudder, she's gone. Where a British destroyer had been moments before, there's only oil and debris and men struggling in the freezing water. The North Atlantic in April will kill you in minutes. The water temperature is perhaps 2 degrees above freezing. Your muscles seize, your blood thickens, your body shuts down, system by system, like someone turning off lights in an empty building. But then, something extraordinary happens. The Admiral Hipper slows. She turns. The massive German cruiser, her hull still bleeding from Glowworm's ramming attack, moves carefully among the survivors. Her crew throws lines, life rings, anything that will float. German sailors risk their own lives leaning over the side to pull British sailors from the water. 37 men are saved. 112, including Gerard Rupp, are not. The German sailors treat the survivors with respect, even admiration. Captain High will later write in his report. The enemy fought with outstanding gallantry. He will go further, he will recommend Gerard Rupp for Britain's highest decoration for valor. It's almost unprecedented. An enemy commander recommending his opponent for his nation's highest honor. In the Admiral Hipper's sick bay, the surviving British sailors receive the same medical treatment as wounded German crew. Among them is leading seaman Owen, pulled from the water barely conscious, and Signal Yeoman Harris, who managed to stay afloat by clinging to a piece of Glowworm's deck plating. They're prisoners now, but they're alive. As the German medical staff worked to save their lives, fighting hypothermia and injuries, news of the battle spreads through the Admiral Hipper. German sailors find excuses to pass by the sick bay to catch a glimpse of these British seamen who had charged a ship 10 times their size. One German officer, speaking English, approaches the senior surviving British officer. "Your captain," he says, "he was very brave indeed." The British sailor, teeth still chattering from the cold, manages a reply. "He was doing his duty." "No," the German insists. "It was more than duty." Back in Britain, Glowworm's final signal has been received. The Admiralty now knows the German invasion of Norway is underway. The warning, bought with 112 lives, allows the Royal Navy to respond faster than they otherwise might have. It's not enough to stop the invasion. Norway will fall, but it's enough to bloody the German nose, to sink several German ships that might otherwise have escaped. The full story of Glowworm's last battle won't be known in Britain until after the war. The survivors spend 5 years in German prisoner of war camps, unable to tell their story. Lieutenant Commander Rupp's wife receives only a telegram: "Missing, presumed killed in action." But in 1945, something remarkable happens. After Germany's surrender, Captain High, now a prisoner himself, makes good on his promise. He formally recommends to the British Admiralty that Gerard Rupp receive the Victoria Cross. The recommendation reads, in part, "Lieutenant Commander Rupp fought his ship with outstanding gallantry and determination against overwhelming odds. His decision to ram the Admiral Hipper, though it cost him his life and his ship, demonstrated a devotion to duty and courage of the highest order." On the 6th of July 1945, the London Gazette announces that Lieutenant Commander Gerard Broadmead Rupp has been posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross, Britain's highest decoration for valor. He is the first Royal Navy officer of World War II to receive it, and the only one ever to be awarded it on the recommendation of the enemy. His citation reads, "Lieutenant Commander Rupp was in command of HMS Glowworm when she encountered enemy forces. Although hopelessly outgunned, he closed with the enemy and fought until his ship was disabled. He then, with supreme courage, rammed the German cruiser Admiral Hipper. As his ship sank, he remained on board, ensuring the safe abandonment of his crew. He was last seen waving farewell to his men from the bridge as Glowworm went down." Section 5. The human cost. But medals don't bring back the dead. In Portsmouth, Plymouth, and 100 other ports and towns across Britain, families mourn sons and husbands and fathers who will never come home. Consider ordinary seaman Thomas Mitchell, 19 years old, from Manchester. He'd joined the Navy to escape the mills, to see something beyond the smoke-stacked skyline of his industrial hometown. His last letter home, written 3 days before the battle, talks about the cold, about missing his mother's cooking, about plans for when his service is up. His mother will keep that letter for the rest of her life, reading it so often the paper wears thin. Or engine room artificer James Crawford, a Scotsman from the Clyde, who'd spent 15 years in the Navy. He was one of the men who kept Glowworm's engines running, even as the ship broke apart around him. His wife was pregnant with their 3rd child when he died. The boy, born 2 months after his father's death, will grow up knowing him only through photographs and stories. These are the individual tragedies that make up the larger sacrifice. Each of those 112 men who died had their own story, their own dreams, their own people waiting for them to come home. The survivors carry their own burden. Survivor's guilt is not a term widely used in 1940, but the feeling is real enough. Why did they live when their shipmates died? Was there something more they could have done? Signal Yeoman Harris, one of the 37 pulled from the water, will spend the rest of his life wondering if he could have helped one more man, saved one more life. In the chaos of those final moments, with Glowworm capsizing and men struggling in the water, he'd had to make choices about who to help, who to let go. Those faces will visit him in dreams for decades to come. But there's pride too, fierce pride in what they accomplished. Glowworm's sacrifice wasn't in vain. The Admiral Hipper, one of Germany's most powerful surface units, was forced to limp back to port for repairs. She missed crucial operations. More importantly, Glowworm's warning allowed the Royal Navy to position forces that would savage the German invasion fleet in the coming days. At the Second Battle of Narvik, British destroyers will sink half the German destroyer force. The warnings that began with Glowworm's desperate signal contribute to this victory. Every German ship sunk is a vindication of Rupp's decision to attack rather than flee. The war continues for 5 more years after Glowworm's loss. The Battle of the Atlantic, the Mediterranean campaigns, the Pacific Theater, the Royal Navy fights on every ocean. But the story of the little destroyer that rammed a heavy cruiser becomes legend, told and retold in wardrooms and mess decks throughout the fleet. It becomes a touchstone for what the Royal Navy represents: fighting spirit against overwhelming odds, duty before survival, the willingness to sacrifice everything for the greater good. When other ships face impossible odds, and many will their crews remember Glowworm. In 1946, a new destroyer joins the Royal Navy. She's named HMS Glowworm, carrying forward the battle honors of her predecessor. Her crew, many of them veterans of the war, feel the weight of that name. They know the standard they must live up to. The second Glowworm serves with distinction through the Cold War, a living reminder of her namesake's sacrifice. When she's finally decommissioned in 1968, veterans of the original Glowworm attend the ceremony. They're old men now, these survivors, but they stand ramrod straight as the white ensign is lowered for the last time. Leading Seaman Owen, one of those pulled from the freezing North Atlantic by German sailors, speaks at the ceremony. "We were ordinary men doing an extraordinary thing. We didn't think about being heroes. We thought about doing our job, about not letting our mates down. Rupp showed us the way. He showed us that sometimes duty demands everything you have to give." The physical memorials are important, the plaques, the monuments, the entries in naval histories. But the true memorial to HMS Glowworm and her crew lives in the tradition she helped establish. Every time a ship's captain makes the hard choice, the dangerous choice, because it's the right choice, Glowworm's legacy lives on. In naval academies around the world, the Battle of HMS Glowworm is studied as an example of tactical aggression and moral courage. Cadets learn the technical details, the angles of approach, the physics of the ramming, the damage assessment. But more importantly, they learn about command decision-making under impossible circumstances. What makes a commander order his ship into certain destruction? What calculus of duty and honor overrides the instinct for survival? These are not questions with easy answers, but Glowworm provides a case study in ultimate sacrifice. Captain High, the German commander who recommended Rupp for the Victoria Cross, survives the war. In the 1,950 seconds, he corresponds with some of Glowworm's survivors. In one letter he writes, "Your captain taught us all something that day about courage. Political differences, national allegiances, these things fade. But courage, true courage, is universal and eternal." Today, more than 80 years after that April morning in 1940, HMS Glowworm's story continues to resonate. In an age of guided missiles and satellite surveillance, the idea of a destroyer ramming a cruiser seems almost medieval. But the human elements, courage, sacrifice, duty, remain timeless. Each year on April 8th, a small ceremony takes place at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. The few remaining family members of Glowworm's crew gather to remember. They're joined by Royal Navy representatives, sometimes by the crew of whatever ship currently holds the battle honor. Norway 1940. The names are read, all 112 men who died that day. It takes nearly 15 minutes to read them all, each name a reminder of a life cut short, a family bereaved, a sacrifice made. Margaret Rupp, Gerard's daughter, was 3 years old when her father died. She grew up with his absence, with the Victoria Cross in a frame on the wall, with people telling her how brave her father was. "I would rather have had a father than a hero," she once said, "but I understand why he did what he did. He couldn't have lived with himself if he'd run away." The last surviving member of Glowworm's crew, Signalman Albert Harris, died in 2012 at the age of 91. Until the end, he could still recall, with perfect clarity, those final moments, the impact of the ramming, the ship rolling over, the terrible cold of the North Atlantic. But what he remembered most vividly was the sight of Lieutenant Commander Roop on the bridge as Glowworm went down. "He could have jumped," Harris said in one of his final interviews. "There was time, but he was still trying to help others. That's the kind of man he was. That's the kind of men they all were." The wreck of HMS Glowworm has never been found. She lies somewhere in the Norwegian Sea, a tomb for 112 sailors. The exact location remains unknown, despite several search attempts. Perhaps that's fitting. She belongs now not to any particular place, but to history, to memory, to the eternal roll of honor of those who gave everything in the service of their country. Modern naval strategists debate whether Roop made the right tactical decision. Could he have done more damage by surviving to fight another day? Was the intelligence about the German fleet worth 112 lives? These are academic questions, asked by people who have never stood on a bridge with enemies closing in and impossible choices to make. What cannot be debated is the impact of Glowworm's sacrifice on those who witnessed it, friend and foe alike. The German sailors who pulled British survivors from the water were changed by what they saw. Some of them would later refuse to participate in unrestricted submarine warfare, citing the honor shown by enemies like Roop. One German sailor, writing home after the battle, told his family, "Today I saw true courage, not the kind they tell us about in propaganda, but the real thing. A small British ship attacked us knowing they would die. Their captain stayed with his ship to save his men. I hope that if I am ever tested like that, I will show half as much bravery." This is perhaps Glowworm's greatest legacy, the proof that even in the mechanized slaughter of modern war, individual courage matters, that there are still things worth dying for, that duty, honor, and sacrifice are not just words, but living principles that ordinary people can embody in extraordinary moments. As we face our own challenges, our own moments of decision, we might ask ourselves, what would Roop do? What would those 112 men do? The answer, demonstrated on that gray morning in April 1940, is clear. They would do their duty, no matter the cost. HMS Glowworm was just one ship among thousands in World War II. Her crew represented a tiny fraction of those who served. But in their final hour, they showed us something essential about the human spirit, that there are no ordinary men, only ordinary circumstances. And when extraordinary circumstances arise, ordinary men can become legends. The North Atlantic is calm today, where Glowworm made her last stand. Cargo ships pass over her grave carrying Norwegian iron ore to ports around the world. Their crews probably don't know the story of the British destroyer that lies beneath them, but she's there still, a guardian of those waters, a reminder that some things are worth fighting for, even when the fight seems hopeless. In the Royal Navy, they have a tradition. When a ship passes the area where Glowworm went down, they ring 8 bells and observe a moment of silence. It's not an official requirement, just something sailors do to honor sailors. In that silence, if you listen carefully, you can almost hear them still the roar of guns, the crash of steel on steel, and above it all, the sound of men doing their duty to the very end. This is the story of HMS Glowworm. This is the story of 149 men who faced impossible odds on a storm-tossed morning and chose to fight rather than flee. This is the story of Lieutenant Commander Gerard Roop, who could have saved himself but chose to save others instead. Remember them. Remember their sacrifice. Remember that in our darkest moments, When hope seems lost and the odds impossible, there is always a choice. We can run or we can ram. HMS Glowworm chose to ram.